She said I was ruining the aesthetic of her wedding photos. Imagine hearing that from the child you once carried on your shoulders through muddy parks and rainy streets. I stood there, holding a bouquet of wildflowers I had picked myself, yellow, white, and blue like the ones her grandmother loved, and she whispered to the photographer, "Could you maybe crop Grandpa out?" That was the moment my heart cracked, quiet and invisible, like ice splitting underfoot. My name's Tom. I'm 71, retired carpenter, widower, and, apparently, an outdated accessory. I raised my granddaughter Emma after her parents died in a car crash when she was 6. I taught her how to ride a bike, how to whistle, how to make pancakes without burning the first one. For years, it was just the two of us in that small house by the lake. She used to call me Super Grandpa, but now, apparently, I didn't fit her modern life. It started a few months ago when she brought home her fiancé, Daniel, tall, confident, the kind of man whose handshake feels like a sales pitch. "Mr. Thomas," he said the first time we met. "Pleasure to meet you." "Tom's fine," I replied, but he never used my name again. To him, I was Emma's grandparent, like a footnote in her biography. They were planning a wedding, something elegant, something timeless but chic, as Emma said, showing me photos of white tents and crystal chandeliers. It looked more like a fashion magazine spread than a celebration of love. She told me they'd hired a designer to curate everything. Even the flowers had a color palette. "No wild ones, Grandpa," she said, laughing softly. "We need everything to match." I smiled and nodded, but inside, something small wilted. In the weeks leading up to the big day, I noticed a distance growing between us. Calls became shorter, visits rarer. When I offered to build them a handmade chest as a wedding gift, she hesitated. "That's sweet," she said carefully, "but we're going for a minimalist vibe. A lifetime of craft, dismissed with a word like vibe." The rehearsal dinner was when I finally understood my place, or rather, my lack of one. It was held at a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices. I showed up early, wearing my best suit, the same navy one I'd worn to her high school graduation. I even polished my shoes, but when I walked in, I could feel eyes on me, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The other guests were all young professionals, sleek hair, sleek clothes, sleek everything. I was the only one who still said please to the waiters. Emma introduced me as my grandfather Tom, but said it so fast it barely landed. I tried to join the conversation at the table, something about real estate trends, but Daniel cut in smoothly. "Let's not bore Grandpa with work talk," he said, chuckling. The table laughed. I laughed too, though my stomach twisted. After dinner, I went outside for air. The city lights reflected off the restaurant's glass walls, and I could see my reflection, a man trying to look like he still belonged. That's when I overheard them. Emma and Daniel standing near the valet. "He's sweet," Daniel said, "but maybe it's better if he just stays in the back during the ceremony." "Back?" Emma's voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Yeah, just for photos and all. We don't want any visual distractions." She hesitated, then sighed. "You're right." I stood there frozen, the night air thick with noise and humiliation. My granddaughter, the girl who once made me paper crowns and called me her hero, now saw me as a visual distraction. I wanted to walk away, but my knees locked. Eventually, I just nodded to myself, as if agreeing with a truth too painful to deny. The next morning, she called, cheerful as ever. "Grandpa, can you help us move some boxes at the venue?" Of course I said yes. I always said yes. That's what love does. It keeps showing up even after it's been uninvited. The wedding was set at a vineyard 2 towns over. Rows of grapevines shimmered in the sunlight. White chairs lined up like soldiers. Everything was perfect, spotless, soulless. I carried boxes, fixed a loose hinge on the archway, even helped the florist hang garlands. Not one person thanked me. They were too busy perfecting perfection. By late afternoon, the guests began arriving, hundreds of them, all beautiful and detached. I sat near the back, where they'd placed me, between a family friend I'd never met and an empty chair. When the music started and Emma appeared in her white gown, she was breathtaking. For a moment, I forgot the hurt. All I saw was my little girl, the one who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen. After the ceremony, the photographer gathered everyone for pictures. "Family of the bride," he called. I stepped forward, but Emma hesitated. Her hand trembled slightly on Daniel's arm. Maybe just immediate family first," she said, not meeting my eyes. My chest tightened. Immediate family. I was the man who'd raised her, who'd sacrificed everything to give her that bright future she now used to erase me. The photographer nodded, and I stepped back into the crowd, clutching the wildflower bouquet I'd brought anyway. Even though it didn't match her palette, that's when she whispered to him, "Could you crop Grandpa out?" And he nodded. And I realized I wasn't part of her story anymore. I was background noise. But what Emma didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the vineyard they were standing on, the one hosting their timeless but chic wedding, belonged to me. Not by inheritance, not by luck, but by 40 years of hard work and a single well-timed decision I'd made when she was still a child. She thought I was just her outdated grandpa. She had no idea she was getting married on my land. I looked around at the glittering guests, the perfect decorations, the laughter that no longer had room for me, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not yet, just awake, because love, when pushed far enough, stops being blind. And that night, after the champagne and the speeches and the polite smiles, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, when they opened the vineyard gates, they'd find something that wasn't on any of their wedding plans. A sign with 4 simple words, "Property under new management." And that's when the real story began. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, the house silent except for the old clock ticking in the hallway. I could still hear Emma's voice echoing in my head. "Crop Grandpa out." That sentence had more power than any hammer I'd ever swung. 40 years of building things with my hands. Homes, boats, toys, dreams. And now I was being erased with one breath. Around 3 a.m., I pulled out an old shoebox from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were faded photos, yellowed receipts, and one deed. The Vineyard deed. 30 acres of rolling green land, bought 20 years ago for almost nothing, back when no one wanted to invest in dying farmland. I had planned to leave it to Emma one day. A wedding gift. A piece of me she could carry into her future. But the girl who called me her hero had turned that gift into a stage set for pretending I didn't exist. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded it. Thomas Whitaker, sole owner. That was my name in neat black ink. I stared at it for a long time, before dialing a number I hadn't used in years. "Tom?" The voice on the other end was gravelly, still warm. "It's been a while." "Hi, Jack," I said. "You still handle real estate?" 30 years and counting. What's up? "I want to transfer ownership of the Whitaker Vineyard." There was a pause. "Transfer it? To who?" I smiled bitterly. "You'll see. Let's just say I'm about to make a few people remember my name." Morning came bright and loud. My phone buzzed with messages from Emma, photos of the wedding, her smiling face beside Daniel's, captions filled with hashtags and champagne emojis. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the vineyard. The wedding team was back, packing up glassware and folding chairs. One of the young coordinators spotted me. "Sir, we're almost done." The owner wanted— "I am the owner," I said quietly, holding up the deed. Her smile vanished. "Oh, sorry, Mr. Whitaker. I didn't realize." "Few people do anymore," I murmured. By noon, I had signed the sale papers with Jack in his downtown office. A local family, the Garcias, were buying it. Hard-working people, 3 generations of farmers who'd lost their old fields to developers. I sold it to them for a fraction of what it was worth. I didn't need the money. I needed peace. "You sure about this, Tom?" Jack asked, scanning the numbers. "You could retire rich off this property." "I already am rich," I said, "just not in the way they measure it." He leaned back, studying me. "This have anything to do with that fancy wedding yesterday?" "Saw the photos online. Looked expensive." I smiled without warmth. It was. The news broke 2 days later. I was sitting on my porch, watching the lake ripple under the morning sun, when my phone started ringing nonstop. Emma's name flashed on the screen again and again. I finally answered. "Grandpa, what did you do?" Her voice cracked between anger and panic. The Vineyard manager just called. He said there's a new owner. That can't be right. You can't just... I can, I said calmly. And I did. Why? Her voice shot up like a child's tantrum. You know how much that place meant to us? Us? I let the word hang in the air. You mean to you and Daniel, to your aesthetic. It never meant much to me once I saw what I'd become in your eyes. She went silent. I continued. I bought that land with your grandmother. We planted the first vines ourselves before your parents died. We dreamed it would be something alive, not a backdrop for photos. My throat tightened. But you turned it into a trophy. That's not fair, she snapped. I didn't mean to hurt you. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. Intentions don't stop pain, sweetheart. Actions do. Grandpa, please. Daniel's furious. We were planning to use that land for the reception business. That land isn't yours to plan anymore, I said. It belongs to the Garcias now. They'll grow grapes, not illusions. Her tone changed, colder. Do you have any idea how much this affects us financially? I do, I said softly. Just like you had an idea of how it affected me when you told that photographer to crop me out. Silence, then a shaky breath. You heard that. I did. She didn't answer for a long time. I could almost hear her realizing how deep her words had cut. Finally, she whispered, I didn't mean it. Daniel just... He said... I know exactly what Daniel said, I interrupted. He said I was a distraction. I've been called worse, Emma, but not by family. Please, she begged now, voice trembling. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm just stepping back, letting you see what life looks like when people stop cleaning up your messes. Grandpa, please. But I'd already ended the call. The next week was quiet. I fixed the porch railing, fed the ducks by the lake, repaired an old rocking chair. But peace doesn't come easy when love still lingers. Every morning, I thought about calling her. Every night, I stopped myself. Then, one evening, I heard a car door slam outside. I looked up and saw Emma walking toward me. No heels this time, no perfect hair or pearl earrings. Just jeans, a wrinkled blouse, and eyes swollen from crying. Grandpa, she whispered, can I come in? I nodded slowly and stepped aside. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the photos on the walls, her as a child, holding a fishing pole, her face covered in pancake batter, her first day of school. She touched one gently. I forgot about these. You forgot a lot of things, I said, not unkindly. I was stupid, she admitted. Daniel kept saying I needed to rebrand myself, to fit in with his world, and I believed him. She laughed bitterly. He told me my family made me look small. I watched her carefully. And what do you think now? Her eyes filled with tears. I think I made myself small. We sat down at the table, the same table where I used to teach her math by counting pennies. She told me everything, how Daniel had been furious about the sale, how he'd accused her of not controlling her family, how he'd called me a liability. The more she talked, the more I saw the girl she used to be flicker back into her face, scared but honest. I don't know who I am anymore, she said quietly. You're still Emma, I said. But you need to find the version that isn't built on someone else's approval. She wiped her eyes. I wish Grandma were here. She is, I said, tapping my chest. Every time you choose kindness over pride, she's right there. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind that hurts and heals at once. Then Emma looked up. Can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really sell it? I smiled faintly. Because I wanted to remind you where real worth comes from. Not from perfect photos or rich husbands, from roots, and knowing which ones to keep. She nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I know, sweetheart, but some lessons can't be learned from words. I reached across the table and took her trembling hand. They need to be lived. Outside, the sun dipped below the trees, painting the sky gold. She squeezed my hand. Will you come to dinner tomorrow? Just us? No photographers, no Daniel, no pretense. I chuckled. Only if you promise there's pie. Her smile, small, fragile, real, was all the answer I needed. As she left, I watched her walk down the driveway, shoulders a little straighter than when she'd arrived. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in weeks, the ache in my chest eased. Maybe love doesn't disappear when it's forgotten. Maybe it just waits, quietly, patiently, for the moment it's remembered again. But what I didn't know then was that Daniel wasn't finished, and neither was I. Because by the next week, my quiet little act of revenge would become front-page news, and Emma would find out exactly who her grandfather really was. The call came early Saturday morning. I was sanding a piece of oak for the new porch railing when my phone buzzed. "Mr. Whitaker," said a clipped voice on the other end. "This is Paul Richards from the Morning Ledger. We'd like to confirm a few details about the Vineyard sale. There's talk that the property used for the Harper wedding was sold out from under the couple immediately after the ceremony. Is that correct?" I froze. "You'll have to ask the new owners," I said slowly. "Its sources claim you're the previous owner. That's true. And that you're the bride's grandfather." I took a deep breath. "That's also true. Would you care to comment on why you sold it?" I looked at the half-finished railing, the fine dust on my fingers, and smiled faintly. "Because sometimes a man needs to remind people where they come from." Then I hung up. By noon, the story was everywhere. Local grandpa sells wedding venue the day after ceremony. The article painted me as a mix between a folk hero and a lunatic, depending on who you asked. Strangers online called it the ultimate power move. Others said it was cruel. I didn't care what they called it. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. But I hadn't expected the fallout to reach Emma so fast. She showed up that afternoon, eyes red again, hair tied back, holding her phone like it was burning her hand. "Grandpa, it's all over the news. Daniel's losing it. He says you humiliated him in front of his investors. People at his firm are calling him the Vineyard Groom." "Catchy name," I said. "Please don't joke. He says you did this on purpose to destroy his reputation." I looked at her calmly. "Emma, I didn't need to destroy anything. Your Daniel built his reputation on borrowed scenery." She sank into the chair across from me. "He's furious. He says if I don't convince you to go on record saying it was a misunderstanding, he'll sue for damages." I laughed, low and steady. "Sue me? For selling what's mine?" "You know lawyers, Grandpa. They'll find a way." "Then they'll find nothing but their own reflection." She bit her lip. "He's been different lately, angrier, controlling. I thought it was stress from work, but—" Her voice trailed off. "Now I think it's who he really is." I said nothing. Sometimes silence says more than judgment. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the headlights disappear down the road. My heart ached for her. She was starting to see the man behind the smile, and it terrified her. I remembered the way Daniel used to hold her waist in public, not lovingly, but possessively, like she was a brand new car he wanted everyone to notice but no one to touch. The next morning, I went to church for the first time in months, not for prayer, for clarity. As I left, I found the Garcia family waiting near the parking lot. "Mr. Whitaker," said Miguel, the eldest son, "we want to thank you again. The land means everything to us." "I'm glad," I said. He hesitated. "But there's something you should know. Yesterday a man came by the vineyard asking for you. Said he was the son-in-law of the previous owner." "Daniel?" Miguel nodded. "He wanted to see the deed, said you tricked him. When we refused, he threatened to call the police." I felt the old soldier in me stir, the part that never liked bullies. "Don't worry," I told them. "You just keep working your vines. I'll handle him." That afternoon, I drove into town. Daniel's car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than my first house, was parked outside the wine office that had once been mine. I found him inside, pacing. His tie was loosened, his face flushed with frustration. "Well, if it isn't the folk hero," he said when he saw me. "Enjoying your 15 minutes of fame?" "Fame fades," I said. "Integrity doesn't." He sneered. "Integrity? You humiliated my wife and me in front of half the city. I didn't humiliate anyone. I sold my property." "You sold it to farmers," he shouted. "Do you know how much value you destroyed?" "I created more than you'll ever understand." He stepped closer. "You think this makes you powerful? You're just a bitter old man clinging to the past." "Maybe," I said evenly, "but at least my past is honest." He laughed bitterly. "You could have given it to Emma, but no, you had to make a scene. What do you even have left? A rundown cabin and some sentimental photos?" I leaned in, my voice low. More than you, son, because everything I have, I built myself. No lies, no shortcuts, no pretending to be something I'm not. For the first time, I saw it. A flicker of insecurity behind his anger. He wasn't just furious, he was frightened. Men like Daniel live off control, and I had taken it away. When I walked out, he called after me, "You'll regret this, old man." I turned. I already regret raising my granddaughter to believe people like you mattered. 2 days later, Emma came again. This time she looked different, calm, almost relieved. She sat on the porch steps beside me and stared at the water. "I left him," she said quietly. I didn't speak. I just waited. He said awful things when the investors pulled out, called me useless, said marrying me had ruined his brand. Can you believe that? His brand. I smiled sadly. A man who loves his brand more than his wife will end up with neither. She laughed through tears. "You were right about him, about everything." "No," I said softly. "I was just older. Sometimes that's the same thing." She looked at me. "They're saying online that you're some kind of legend. People are making memes. Grandpa's revenge." I chuckled. "Guess I finally went viral." "Are you proud of what you did?" she asked after a moment. I thought about it. "Pride isn't the right word. I didn't do it to hurt you, Emma. I did it so you'd remember who built the ground you stand on." She nodded slowly. "I remember now." We sat quietly for a while, watching the light ripple across the lake. Then she said, "There's something else I found. Daniel's laptop. There are emails. Deals he made using the vineyard as collateral. He borrowed money he couldn't pay back. That explains his panic. What should I do?" "Nothing," I said. "Let him dig his own hole. Some men only learn when the earth gives way beneath them." She looked at me then, really looked, not at the old man with worn hands, but at the person who had always been there, holding her up even when she turned away. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered. "Maybe not yet," I said, smiling faintly. "But you're earning it." That night, I received another call from the same reporter. "Mr. Whitaker, there's talk your ex-grandson-in-law is under investigation for fraud. Any comment?" I stared out at the dark lake, listening to the crickets. "Only this," I said. "Sometimes karma needs a carpenter, someone to build the lesson sturdy enough that it doesn't collapse." When I hung up, the house was quiet again. On the wall, a single photo caught my eye. Emma, 6 years old, covered in flour, holding a crooked pancake. I smiled. Tomorrow, she'd come over again. We'd cook breakfast together, maybe burn the first pancake like old times. And for the first time in a long while, she'd call me Grandpa without hesitation. But before that morning came, there would be one more twist, the kind that would test everything we just rebuilt, because the next knock on my door wouldn't be from Emma. It would be from the police. The knock came at 6:17 a.m., sharp, steady, official. The kind of knock that doesn't ask permission, it announces authority. I opened the door and saw 2 men in plain suits. One flashed a badge. "Mr. Thomas Whitaker." "That's me," I said. "I'm Detective Harris. This is Officer Patel. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding Daniel Harper and the Vineyard transaction." I stepped aside. "You're early for coffee, gentlemen." Harris gave a small, polite smile. "We'll try not to take up too much of your time." They sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught Emma her multiplication tables. Funny how history loops on itself. Different lessons, same furniture. "Mr. Whitaker," Harris began, flipping open a notebook. "We understand you were the previous owner of the Whitaker Vineyard and that you sold it the morning after your granddaughter's wedding." "Correct." "Can you explain why you sold it so suddenly?" "I'd been meaning to for a while. The timing was just poetic." Patel raised an eyebrow. "Poetic?" I shrugged. "Let's say the wedding helped me make up my mind." Harris nodded slowly. "According to Mr. Harper, you deliberately sabotaged his business plans and may have withheld documents related to joint investments." I leaned back. "Joint investments?" The man never invested a cent. "The vineyard was mine long before he joined our family. Check the county records. You'll find one name, mine." The detectives exchanged a look. "We have, sir. The title transfer is clean, but we still need to verify some claims. Mr. Harper alleges there were financial losses tied to an event planning venture registered under his company." Not my company, I said flatly. If he used the vineyard as collateral, that's his crime, not mine. Patel nodded, jotting something down. One more thing. Did you recently speak with the media about Mr. Harper's business practices? I smiled faintly. You mean, did I tell the truth? Yes, I did. Harris sighed. Mr. Harper is filing a harassment claim. He says you're defaming him publicly. I chuckled. Defaming him requires lies. I'm just repeating the ones he told himself. The younger officer couldn't help but grin. Harris shot him a warning look. That's all for now, sir, but please remain available in case we need follow-up questions. You know where to find me, I said. Same place I've been for 40 years. They stood to leave. As they reached the door, Harris turned back. For what it's worth, Mr. Whitaker, I've seen a lot of family disputes over money. Most of them start ugly and end worse. But I get the feeling this isn't over. I nodded. You're right, but maybe it'll end better than it began. That afternoon, I drove into town to buy lumber. People recognize me now, the old man from the news. A young cashier at the hardware store smiled shyly. You're that guy, right? The Vineyard grandpa? I suppose I am, I said. She grinned. Legend. My granddad loved your interview. Said he'd have done the same thing. Tell him to aim for peace, not headlines, I said, though I couldn't help smiling back. When I got home, Emma was waiting on the porch, holding 2 cups of coffee. They came to my apartment, she said quietly. The police. They asked about Daniel, about his accounts. What did you tell them? The truth, she said. That I didn't know what he was doing, that you had nothing to do with it. She hesitated. They said he might be charged with fraud. I nodded slowly. That doesn't surprise me. He's calling me non-stop. He wants me to give a statement saying you forced the sale to ruin him. And what are you going to do? She met my eyes. Tell them I know the difference between ruin and consequence. For a long while we sat in silence, watching the lake shimmer under the late afternoon sun. The wind smelled like rain and grapes. The vineyard was only a few miles away, but it felt like another world. I keep thinking about Grandma, Emma said softly. What she'd say if she saw all this. She'd probably tell us both to stop being stubborn, I said. Emma laughed, but there was sadness under it. Do you miss her every day? Every breath, I said. She nodded slowly, her eyes distant. I'm trying to be better, Grandpa. I really am. But sometimes I feel like I lost the version of myself you loved. I put my hand over hers. Then find her again. She's still in there. You just buried her under other people's expectations. The sky darkened, thunder rolling in the distance. Emma stood, brushing tears from her cheeks. You know they'll twist this, right? Daniel's family, the lawyers, the press. They'll make you the villain. I smiled faintly. Then I'll be their villain, as long as you remember the truth. She nodded, hugged me tight, and drove away. I stood on the porch watching her taillights fade down the road, my heart heavy, but steady. 3 days later, another article hit the front page. Investor fraud scandal tied to Harper Events, Inc. The report detailed how Daniel had borrowed $500,000 using false documents. One of them, a forged property guarantee bearing my old vineyard's name. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and read every line twice. My name wasn't mentioned, but his was, in bold, all caps, right under the words, under investigation. My phone buzzed again. Emma. Grandpa, she whispered, they arrested him. I know. He's blaming you for everything. Let him, I said gently. Sometimes the loudest lie dies under its own echo. She sniffled. I don't know how to face people. Everyone's talking. Then let them talk. People forget fast. What matters is what you do next. I want to start over, she said. For real this time. Good, I said. Then come over tomorrow, bring flour and eggs. We'll start with pancakes. She laughed, a soft, trembling sound. Okay. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the dock, sat under the stars, and let the wind carry the smell of rain. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a train whistle, lonely, familiar. I thought about all the years I'd spent working, saving, giving, about how easily love can turn to pride and pride to pain. Then I thought about Emma, the little girl with flour on her nose who used to say, "Grandpa, you can fix anything." Maybe she'd been right. Maybe not everything could be fixed, but some things could be rebuilt. When I came back inside, there was a message on my answering machine, a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. "Tom, it's Richard, your brother." I froze. "Just saw the news. You've caused quite the stir, old man. Call me back. I think we need to talk about the Vineyard." I stared at the phone for a long time, the air suddenly thick with ghosts I thought I'd buried. Richard. The brother I hadn't spoken to since the day he stole our father's inheritance and disappeared out west. Maybe the past wasn't done testing me after all, and I had a feeling that whatever he wanted, money, redemption, or revenge, this was only the beginning. I hadn't heard Richard's voice in 15 years, but it still carried the same smooth arrogance, the kind that always made me feel like I was one step behind him, even when I wasn't. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the phone like it might start talking again. The old anger came back, slow and heavy, like smoke filling a room. The last time I saw my brother, he was standing in my driveway with a duffel bag full of cash that didn't belong to him. Our father's savings, the last piece of a life built by calloused hands and long nights. Richard took it to invest, he said. I told him investments built on betrayal don't grow. He didn't listen. He never did. Now, after all these years, he wanted to talk about the Vineyard. I picked up the phone, dialed the number he'd left, and waited. He answered on the second ring. "Tom," he said, like we'd spoken yesterday. "Good to hear your voice." "You picked a strange time to miss me, Rich." He chuckled. "I saw the headlines. You've become a local celebrity. Thought maybe you'd finally learn to play the game. Is that what you call it, taking what isn't yours?" "Don't start with that," he said sharply. "I called because that vineyard isn't just your story. You used Dad's land to build it. Technically, it belongs to both of us." I laughed. "You forfeited your share the day you stole from him." "That's your version. Lawyers might see it differently." I could almost hear the smile in his voice. "You've got attention now, Tom, and attention brings value. Developers will pay millions for that land. I say we make a deal, 50-50 split. You sell, I sign off, we both walk away rich." "I already sold it," I said. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "You what?" "Sold it, to a family that'll actually work it." "You're lying." "No, Rich, for once in my life, I'm telling the truth." He swore under his breath. "You stupid sentimental fool. You always were." "Maybe, but I sleep better than you." He hung up. The next day, Emma stopped by again, carrying a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I found this in Daniel's things," she said quietly. "I think you should see it." Inside were contracts, copies of fake investment proposals, and an old folder labeled Whitaker Holdings. "These were your father's," she said. "Daniel was using them to fake capital backing." My chest tightened. "How did he even get these?" She looked ashamed. "I told him about Uncle Richard once, how there was family money in the past. I thought it made us sound better. He must have found a way to track him down." I flipped through the pages, each one a reminder of what greed does to a family. My brother had been helping Daniel, maybe even guiding him. 2 snakes coiled around the same tree. "Emma," I said slowly, "did Daniel ever mention someone named Richard?" She frowned. "Once. He said a man called him with an offer to buy out the vineyard before the wedding. He said he refused because it wasn't enough money." My stomach sank. He wasn't refusing. He was waiting. He thought I'd die before he had to pay. Emma covered her mouth. "Grandpa, are you saying Daniel and Richard were working together?" "Looks that way." The rain began to fall outside, tapping the windows in soft, rhythmic beats. It sounded like footsteps from another life. "Why would your own brother do that to you?" she whispered. I stared at the papers. "Because Richard never believed in enough. No matter how much he had, he wanted more, and men like that don't stop until someone stops them." She leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to finish what I started," I said. The next week was a storm of lawyers, reporters, and silence from Richard. I knew he was out there somewhere, watching, calculating. He always waited for his moment to strike when others were distracted. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter. no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Meet me at the Vineyard, Friday 8 p.m. No police, no games. Let's settle this, like brothers. No signature. But I didn't need one. Friday came cold and gray. I drove to the Vineyard as the sun slipped behind the hills. The Garcias had gone home for the night. The rows of vines swayed gently in the wind, whispering secrets. I found Richard standing under the old oak near the fence line, hands in his pockets, wearing a black coat that didn't fit his aging frame. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to follow me through the fields, asking 100 questions about wood and soil. "You came," he said. "I always do," I replied. He smiled faintly. "You remember this place, Tom? Dad used to say it would outlast us." "It has," I said. "Not for long." He pulled a folder from his coat. "I still have connections. Developers are offering $3 million. You could have been set for life." "I'm already set," I said. "In peace." Peace doesn't buy you a future. Maybe not, but greed ruins one. He stepped closer, rain beginning to fall again. "You always thought you were better than me." The saint, the hard-working brother. But look at you now, alone in an empty house, clinging to ghosts. "Maybe," I said quietly, "but at least my ghosts tell the truth." He glared at me, and for a moment I saw his hand twitch inside his coat pocket. Something metallic glinted. A gun. "Rich," I said calmly, "don't." "You took everything from me," he shouted. "The land, the name, the legacy." I raised my voice just enough to cut through the rain. "You took it from yourself." We stood there in the storm, two old men staring across the wreckage of our family. The thunder cracked above us. For a moment, I thought he'd pull the trigger. Instead, he dropped the gun into the mud and sank to his knees, sobbing. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "I just wanted one thing that was mine." I stepped forward, put a hand on his shoulder. "It could have been, Rich. It always could have been." He left town the next morning. The police found his car abandoned at the station. No one knew where he went. I didn't ask. Some ghosts are better left wandering. Emma came by later with breakfast. "The news says your brother fled. Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "And maybe it's for the best." She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa." I smiled. "Don't be. Just learn." That night, she stayed for dinner. We cooked together. Real food, not takeout. She hummed while she stirred the sauce, just like her grandmother used to. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. As we sat down to eat, she said, "Do you ever regret selling the Vineyard?" I thought for a long moment. "No. Because some things aren't meant to be owned forever. They're meant to remind us who we are." She smiled softly. "Who are we then?" "We're Whitakers," I said. "And we rebuild." Outside, the rain stopped. The moon broke through the clouds, silvering the lake. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. But peace, I've learned, is never the end of a story. It's only the quiet before the next storm. Because 1 week later, I received a letter from a lawyer in New York. A letter that began with the words, "Mr. Whitaker, we regret to inform you that your brother Richard left a will naming your granddaughter, Emma Harper, as the sole heir to his remaining estate." And with that, the past I'd tried to bury came roaring back to life. The letter sat on my table for hours before I opened it again. I must have read that first line 100 times, each word heavier than the last. Your brother Richard left your granddaughter, Emma Harper, as the sole heir to his remaining estate. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Fear? Guilt? It was like the past had reached through time and laid its hand on her shoulder instead of mine, and I didn't know if it was offering a gift or a curse. Emma arrived that evening, cheeks pink from the cold. "You got the letter too?" she asked quietly. She held up an envelope identical to mine. "I did," I said. "Come inside. We'll read it together." We sat at the kitchen table, the one that had become our truce ground, and unfolded the document. The will was simple. Every cent, every asset, every bond Richard still had, close to $2 million, was to go to Emma Harper. The man who'd betrayed our family had left his entire fortune to the one person who still carried our name with any honesty left. Emma's hands trembled as she read. Why would he do this? Maybe guilt, I said. Maybe he wanted to make peace before he vanished. But he never even met me. He met the idea of you, I said quietly. And maybe that was enough. She looked up at me, eyes glistening. Should I accept it? That's for you to decide, sweetheart. But money from a broken man carries pieces of the break inside it. You have to be careful what it fixes, and what it cracks wider. She stared down at the papers, lips pressed tight. If I take it, it feels like forgiving him. If I don't, it feels like wasting what could finally do some good. Maybe there's a third choice, I said. Use it to build something he never could, a future that isn't built on lies. Weeks passed, winter settled over the town like an old blanket, quiet and heavy. Emma visited almost every day now. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just sat, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall. It was enough. One evening she came in with a folder tucked under her arm. I've made my decision, she said, setting it down in front of me. I'm using the inheritance to reopen the vineyard. I froze. Emma, not as a business, she said quickly, as a community farm, for people who need a second chance. Veterans, single parents, kids who've aged out of foster care. I already talked to the Garcias. They love the idea. They'll help run it. I stared at her, my chest tightening with something I hadn't felt in years. Pride so strong it hurt. You're turning your uncle's guilt into something good. She smiled softly. And your lesson into something real. I leaned back, trying to hide the tears that were already rising. Your grandmother would have liked that. I know, she whispered. I felt her today while I was signing the papers, like she was saying, "Finally, you stubborn girl." I laughed. Sounds like her. The day the new sign went up, the entire town came out to see it. The vines were bare under the winter sky, but the air buzzed with life. Whitaker Haven, the sign read, where things grow back stronger. Emma stood beside me in her worn coat, wind whipping her hair across her face. Do you think people will come? She asked. They'll come, I said. People always find their way back to good soil. She took my arm and squeezed it tight. You know, I think I finally understand what you meant that day at the wedding, about roots and worth. I smiled at her. And what did I mean? That some things you don't outgrow, you grow back into. We stood there for a long time, watching the sun break through the clouds. Reporters had come again, but this time they weren't asking about revenge. They were asking about renewal, about how a broken family had built something that could heal others. I didn't say much. Emma did the talking now, her voice steady, full of quiet conviction. When they asked her why she named it Whitaker Haven, she smiled at the cameras and said, "Because it started with a man who built everything with his hands, and rebuilt me with his heart." I turned away before they could see my eyes. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone on the porch. The stars shimmered above the dark fields, the vines glistening with frost. Emma's laughter still echoed faintly from where the workers had celebrated. I closed my eyes and saw it all as it had been. The first rose I planted with her grandmother, the dusty hands, the sunburns, the quiet pride. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. The world had a strange way of mending itself, of turning old wounds into fertile ground. Maybe that's what legacy really was, not what you leave for someone, but what you leave in them. I went inside and found the letter Richard had sent still on the table. I folded it carefully, tucked it into a drawer with the old photos of Emma as a child, and whispered, "Rest, brother. She's going to do what we couldn't." Outside, the wind stirred through the bare vines, carrying the faint scent of earth and promise. I sat down by the window, pen in hand, and wrote one last note for Emma to leave with my will. "Dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've gone to see your grandmother. Don't be sad. Just keep the soil alive. Don't let it turn cold. People will come and go, some to hurt, some to heal. But the land, it remembers kindness. That's our real inheritance. Love, Grandpa." I set the pen down, looked out across the fields one last time, and smiled. Because the land was quiet now, and so was I. And for the first time in a long, long life, everything felt whole again. The end.